We'll start in about a minute. We usually start around 2 or 3 minutes past. Let me see here. And as you may know, this is a capacity building session that takes place and has been taking place every Monday at 2 o'clock Central European time. So if you're interested in cultural game jams, empowerment of youth, etc., then join us Mondays at 2 o'clock. So put aside the time. Today we'll be talking about the quadruple helix cultural innovation system. And we have the project lead, the fantastic project lead, Rikke Toft Nørgaard, to start out with a presentation. And then after that, we will have some questions, some talks together with Elias Karayanis, who will be joining us, who has already joined us and who will then be part of this session. So in total, we have a good hour or a bit more for this session. Please, everyone, tell us who you are in the chat, write your LinkedIn profile, and also tell us why you're here. It would be just good to know why you have joined us. What's the reason? And I think now we're about 3 minutes past, so I will pass the word to Rikke Toft Nørgaard. Take away the Zoom, Rikke.
Thank you, Rasmus. And I think me and Elias just talked about that it might actually be a good idea if Elias went first, if that's okay for you, because Elias is actually
that's perfectly fine.
Some of the foundation of the EPIC-WE project. So I will kind of jump off.
I see there is an updated agenda. That's true. Go for it.
Yeah, sorry, Rasmus. Yeah, thank you. So Elias, the floor is yours.
Elias, the Zoom is yours.
Yes, thank you. I very much appreciate a few months ago by Rikke's invitation to join this very interesting project, and very gratifying for me, of course, because it happens that I was involved, I was present at the beginning, as they say, in terms of the conceptualization of the helical architecture, the evolution of the triple helix into the quadruple, and then the quintuple. And we'll talk about that today with some other developments. First, let me go into my slides, and I will go quickly. Hopefully, we can discuss further. And there is related publications I'm happy to share. As was shown, I've been at George Washington for 30 years almost now, and I've been 20 plus years full professor there with other activities in Europe as well currently. Let me then turn off the camera because I need to work off the large screen. I hope it's okay. So this is a set of slides that relate to, as you see with the title, the quintuple innovation helix. That is government, university, industry, civil society, which is the quadruple innovation helix, and then that the EPIC-WE has been pivoting around. And then I'm since for the last almost 15 years now, a proponent of the need to take into account the environment in all this. So that makes the quintuple helix the fifth dimension, if you wish. And that's adding the environment to the other four. Now, we have been doing some work recently on issues that involve and relate democracy, environment, and technology, and their interactions and implications and dynamics. And that relates obviously to pretty much everything that affects us, and things where we have as academics and researchers a responsibility and a role to play. Even more so perhaps with recent developments. I think, and as you'll see the slides later on, democracy and environment, I consider them in a sense endangered. And we need to figure out ways that technology in a constructive and positive way can play a role. That certainly includes artificial intelligence that you see here, the the latest variation of the quintuple innovation helix. We call it a quintuple helix plus. And the idea is to look at a number of, take a number of perspectives: theory, policy, practice, and politics. Because in the end, just theory is not good enough. And nowadays it's critical actually to make sure that theory imbues and shapes and influences policy, practice, and the politics of our democracies. This is about how developed democracies can fare better going forward. In fact, can help others and can help other countries and deal with the challenge of emerging autocracies, as we know that is unfolding in front of us. So the context of understanding how to operationalize the theory, policy, practice, and politics, the TP3 perspective I list here, how to operationalize imbuing our activities and our interactions with the quintuple helix ideas, the collaboration on multiple levels and multiple ways, as we'll see later on, is looked at through the lens, is operationalized through the frameworks of what we call here industry and society 6.0. These are, again, the latest developments we're aiming to further understand and conceptualize and then implement, building on Industry 4.0 that we should be aware of. I assume and imagine there's also Industry 5.0. The Commission has adopted that as a good practice, and Society 5.0 as well. So imbuing those with AI modalities in a pervasive way that is also, of course, human-friendly and human-centric is the challenge. And the way to do this is through collaboration. The public-private people-planet partnerships, or P5 partnerships, is what I'm referring to. And the GeoSTEP is geostrategic, technological, economic, and political challenges. Okay, so I think now I could be done, Enrique, but let me continue then. Okay, so here is the first quote. Going quickly through these about imagination. The idea is that we, as I like to say, we should be ready, willing, and able to think beyond the box. I'm fascinated, and for some reason, I have a strange affinity to stories and the sagas, and in particular Viking stories. In the end, these were, as they call themselves, they try to be traders, but they were first raiders. Well, there is a certain duality in this, actually, with interesting extensions and applications to our daily lives. But the idea is that they really were among the first that probably discovered the New World, Vineland, beyond Greenland and Iceland. And there's also some mythology about the ancient my ancestors, the ancient Greeks, also, of course, people of the sea, thinking in that sense, what is beyond the horizon. So thinking beyond the box, this is the idea. This is what I'd like to emphasize. It's very important. And that is what Einstein referred to. Now, this is a reality check. AI is a threat. This guy, a Nobel laureate, one of the creators of AI in the UK, has identified it as an immediate and clear and present danger. It doesn't have to be that way. And of course, I'm focusing and interested in being constructively optimistic in a rather grounded manner, of course. So now we have a few slides that have a lot of information in them, but I would like to just use them as a quick frame of reference for our discussion and awareness. First of all, this is about the GeoSTEP challenges that I mentioned and the role of AI in those. You're pretty much, I would say, we're all aware of those in some fashion: climate change, political instability, technological disruption, and so forth. And then AI can help. And of course, it is a double-edged sword, as we know. But nonetheless, there's a predictive capabilities and also agile governance and the agility overall in our collaborations and partnerships. The framework to operationalize those I mentioned before, Industry and Society 6.0, is really about extending, expanding, and evolving the prior frameworks. Industry 4.0 being more technocentric, And now an effort to balance that with human-centric configurations in the Industry and Society 5.0 is where really the leading edge or the frontier of the current efforts. We try to look, as I said, think beyond the box, look at the box on the right here. We try to think beyond the box. And the idea and the issue here, the challenge and opportunity is to actually become much more proactive and willing and ready to take the risks, to sail beyond the horizon, as I would say, because it is in a way necessary to overcome the current realities and the emerging challenges. This is the issue. It's not just enough to cope. And that certainly applies to what the environmental challenges may be, the climate crisis. One of the journals I edit, the Journal of the Knowledge Economy, has an editor's corner with some of my thoughts and comments, one of which is the challenge to actually figure out ways, whether it is geoengineering or also alternative uses of energy generation that I'll briefly touch on, to actually not just try to, they talk about 2030 being the year when we stop adding carbon emissions to the atmosphere. The idea is that we need to actually figure out ways to much more proactively and effectively reduce the burden on our planet from our activities. Reduce, not just stop increasing. And in fact, start decreasing at an increasing rate. This is another issue. So here we have the interconnection of industry and society, different aspects. They all are listed here because they could be inspiration for the EPIC We, project, the management context, right? The themes, the vision, and the priorities. At least those, I won't read through all of them, but the point is we need to be responsible and ethical. This is about the triple top line and triple bottom line issues. And the ESG issues in the good sense, how to actually implement those in a manner that makes sustainability a real priority and something that actually is becoming more robust, not less. So here is now the discussion, the point I mentioned briefly before about democracy, environment, and technology. Democracy and environment in many ways being threatened, and the need to protect, nurture and husband those, in effect, to really curate our democracies and our environment. And I believe that what we're dealing with, the focus of how to partner and collaborate more effectively, proactively, and in a way, again, thinking beyond the box, creatively, is enabled and empowered through the helical architecture approach. It's not just a nice way to produce a picture. It's, I think, very much about how to do things differently, to introduce different standards for conceptualizing and managing socioeconomic, sociopolitical, and sociotechnical circumstances. And this is and challenges. This is what I show here in that sense, the GeoSTEP challenges that I mentioned: governance, societal, economic, technological, environmental, and policy. Now, there's things such as currency instability. And it's interesting, again, technology comes into play here with the cryptocurrencies nowadays, among other things. And that could be potentially, eventually a good thing. But of course, now it is really a challenge and an unknown factor, right? And on energy, I'll talk about things like nuclear fusion briefly, because that's another issue. Recently in Virginia, there was an announcement by the governor how they're planning to set up a factory for building infrastructure and capabilities for nuclear fusion energy generation. I'm agnostic. I'm not pro or against, but what I'm saying, and I think, is that to the extent that this actually becomes real as a possibility and is properly, of course, managed, it could, again, help us think beyond the box, bypass, in a Gordian knot sense, help abolish a lot of the current issues, whether we have natural gas or not, oil or not, and what have you. And that could really mean a whole different reality for the democracies, among other players globally and beyond, actually. Now, We have government, university, industry, civil society, and the environment. The 5 strands of the quintuple helix presented here, and in a matrix configuration, how they're connected and what the implications and components for industry and society 6.0 may be. So these are really mini scenario or case studies showing how, for instance, in the environmental element, how in Industry 6.0 there is an emphasis on sustainability, but also very proactively leveraging artificial intelligence to help do so, and engage with advanced technologies in that sense as well. And with Society 6.0, how the social needs are in fact intertwined and managed proactively with the environmental challenges. So societal progress and ecological responsibility are not to apparently antithetical set of options. And this is very important because especially emerging economies are always raising the issue, or we have the right to pollute as you did before us and all that. That should not be the actual set of questions or challenges. Now, with the AI, the role of AI, it's emerging as a strategic tool, as we know. There's a lot of concerns, but there is also possibilities to improve things. And here are some examples. Data-driven, I'll give you a second to review. There is data-driven decision-making and predictive analytics and governance. You could envision things like real-time, among other things, taxation on the actual, not imputed value added of whatever activity, in a way that could be much more accurate and fair. This, of course, could become Big Brother, but that's, again, at the other side of the same coin. Trade optimization issues, healthcare innovation prediction. This is about something that is important in investing in research and development and driving innovation. It's about understanding and leveraging even disruption, the possibility that you could have an upending of markets and technological standards. We see this in an interesting way in industries like some of the, as I will discuss, public interest technologies examples, whether it's semiconductors or, but also auto manufacturing. We see the upheaval in the electric car market moving very quickly from west to east, and the implications for the US and Europe. And so, but there are other public, as we call them, public interest technologies. AI is considered one of them. Energy generation is another one, and I'll talk about it as well. The idea is to figure out how to serve the public good, address social challenges. And in essence, again, it's about safeguarding democracy and the environment. Let me give you here, in that sense, a mapping of the evolution of ecosystems along the helical architecture genealogy, if I may call this. This is the triple, quadruple, and quintuple helix along within the context of 3 examples of public interest technologies: AI, semiconductor, and fusion energy technology. And this is something that tries to map chronologically the evolution of things, and this is part of a retrospective of a paper that we've recently published talking about. I'll let you take a moment to review this before I. Okay, so what is implicit in this, and of course, is something, again, that we're discussing in related publications, is the convergence effect, also the convergence across industries and the emerging need for further collaboration, cross-sectoral and across the quintuple helix landscape. And in fact, actually, that is emerging with ad hoc, so to speak, initiatives locally and also globally around networks of collaborators. But that needs to become embedded. This is why I talked about theory, policy, practice, and politics earlier. In my view, it's critical nowadays to make this embedded in policies and practices that are shaped and driven by legislation as well, and that they also help shape legislation in the democracies in a transparent way, of course, because that actually can help counterbalance other influences, in my mind, at least. I may be wrong, but here we have the mapping of this, the P5 concept I mentioned before, and how therefore these partnerships are being enacted and could further advance, involving public, private, people, partnerships, and planet aspects. Okay, entrepreneurship and innovation as a creator of opportunities and new value added could be a very important catalyst, trigger, catalyst, and accelerator, I would say, along this again landscape, and that could be very significant. And therefore, modalities and methodologies like living labs or incubation and leveraging technology and AI in particular to support through, for instance, advanced forms of crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, support, catalyze, and again, and accelerate entrepreneurial activities could be very important. It's happening already, as I said, in several parts of developed countries. This is the goals we all know that we're striving for. 2030 was the timeline, but then, of course, it will need to be pushed further. And the question is, where can progress be optimized? This is something that is part of my work. I envisioned this 20 years ago in a book on smart development, and how and where technology could actually play a role to allow us to move from conditions of artificial or natural, rather, scarcity to artificial abundance. This is, again, the optimistic scenario about technology. You can actually have tendencies and trends and developments in reverse. You can have natural abundance, and through technology and the role of special interests and different schemes, end up moving to artificial scarcity. Of course, markets operate on equilibria points and the balancing of supply and demand. There has to be certain demand that is not fully met for supply and pricing schemes to be sustainable. But there is so many games being played out of these things nowadays, even as we speak. For instance, in the energy market, with the unfortunate conditions of war in Europe and the different other, there is the reality versus the perception of reality. And that is the challenge and opportunity that behooves all citizens of developed democracies to be both informed and engaged in this way. Hopefully what this project is about, of course, cannot solve everything, but it can be a major catalyst and driver in transforming the mindset of the polity, the society, the civics, and the behaviors of people. In the past, that was a lot more mature, unfortunately, I have to say, compared to what's happening today. Technology, social media, for instance, has helped demature, I would call it. That's a term I would introduce for lack of a better one. Demature our societies and our minds. I see that with young children and everybody else, of course, but that's where the biggest effect can be visible. And that's where the challenge is. Europe and countries around Europe are engaging in different schemes and laws to limit access to smartphones up to a certain age. There's a good reason for that. I'm using that as an example to inspire thinking about other activities to promote and encourage better practices and policies and politics. This is a one-slide description of my doctoral thesis of 30 years ago, where I effectively, FB is feedback, FF is feed forward, and SOF, self-organizing feedback. This is inspired by my engineering studies, adapted to organizational studies, where I looked at higher order learning. Interestingly, nowadays we talk about deep learning and other things of that type. With AI, that was actually stuff that, as part of AI at the time, I embedded in robotic applications, and then I applied to organizational learning and so forth. So the double loop learning by Chris Argyris and others in Harvard and elsewhere, and Sean at the time, I further advanced and developed and studied in case studies. That was my first book, actually, with the same title you see here, Strategic Management of Technological Learning. That actually is still very relevant in my mind to what we're discussing, learning to learn, and learning to learn how to learn. If you practice that, and it's almost like a Zen type of effort goes through your life, you actually can end up thinking beyond the box, envisioning. You may need to get some kind of weed to help your emotive state. But in any case, we had the oracles in the antiquity and other special people that we could envision the future. We all need to get to develop this capability to envision, to find the courage to handle the realities that are confronting us. So this is the context of our discussion. Again, triple, quadruple, quintuple helix. This is a top-down view just to see we're at the heart of it if we manage to truly and fully engage through policies, practices, and politics, the government, university, industry, civil society, stakeholders. And with an environmental priority, you can get to smart, sustainable, inclusive growth that is still very much needed. Democracy's promise and potential is realized on people having a surplus, not a deficit of trust. So the benefit of the surplus of trust is critical. Oliver Williamson, one of the Nobel laureates in economics, talked about transaction cost economics. The more trust we have, the lower transaction costs we have. And ironically, nowadays, transactionalism is a mode, a fashion, coming from the very top. Well, that's about it. You need to have people trusting, and not people that are foolish or scared, people who truly choose to trust. So this is where the challenge for innovators lies, to convince and engage. Machiavelli said, "I'd rather be feared than loved," but nonetheless, the innovator, he said this right here, the innovator has tremendous burden, Sisyphean burden to counteract. And of course, some succeed. This is the bigger context. Hold on here. I want to stay here for a moment. That's where and how the quintuple innovation helix on the upper right engages with capabilities on the left that are enabled by artificial intelligence. And these are all materials from related publications I have. For instance, the 7 Ps state model I published in an IEEE transactions paper on ambidextrous cybersecurity, but that is applicable to many other contexts. This is about a practical algorithm or methodology to enact our capacity to envision and anticipate and adapt and leverage, as I said earlier, uncertainty and disruption possibly. So it's about being patient, persistent, persevering, proactive. And these are attributes of attitude, and then behavioral traits, predictive, preventive, preemptive. These are enabled by AI nowadays. So the more accurate you can be in that, the more effective and efficient you can become. And so here at the heart of it, so the AmbiCyber architecture is building on these, but the idea is that you don't just pursue security for the sake of it. You pursue security to secure smart growth, as I said before. And here at the heart of it, therefore, is this activity that should be ongoing about our creative societies and economies, exploration, exploitation, development, and deployment. Develop solutions, whether it's about entrepreneurial endeavor or about solving socio-political, socioeconomic, or socio-technical issues. So I talked about security before and managing it and the cyber aspect of it. Well, there is the issue of risks that is inherent in understanding the landscape. So there are for this report, the four major categories of risks are climate, demographic, technological, and geostrategic shifts. And this is one configuration to show how the different risks can be identified and then managed. AI, again, can be very important in this regard. And all of that relates and is a driver and creator source of challenges and possible opportunities where the helical, quintuple helix configuration can have a very big role to play. Historically, let me show you briefly here just a map of the pathway or the evolution of industry 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm just showing that to provide more context for our discussion and the concepts that I'm throwing at you today. And then, of course, society 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is about, in the end, as you saw there, technocentric and human-centric conceptualization, understanding of society. It's about rediscovering humanity in simple terms, ensuring that technology becomes our true and faithful servant and partner, but in a way that doesn't realize Hinton's fears that I showed in the beginning. Okay, this is again something as to see if you have how good retention you have. I'm just showing you this map. They do that in advertising. They show things twice to enhance your retention. A brief commentary about artificial intelligence and the implication here, or the joke, so to speak, is not so much on the machines as on the humans, if you read this carefully. And so the issue is, will the humans be wise enough to cope with AI and use it in a way that will help them, not destroy them? So this is looking at 2024, as we call them, framework conditions, and what, for instance, we talked about different public interest technologies before, what the role of semiconductors might be, and it could be in security, value creation, and innovation capabilities. And this also showing in attempting a helical representation and rendering of the different stakeholder and flows, elements and dynamics. In this sense, we look at data, information, knowledge, but also experience, wisdom, and intuition. I talked about the sagas and the narratives earlier on, and the shamans and the prophets and the oracles. Well, that's all there in that context. The idea is that as we develop through our higher order learning, our capacity to conceptualize our experience and look back to see ahead, hopefully we can see more clearly. And AI actually can really, really help do that. There are solutions already, applications where, at least in this very short term, based on past experience, you can truly, with some very high confidence, expect what will happen, right? So, and of course, you can envision different contexts, both civilian and military applications where this could make a big difference. Now, looking in closing at the 2025 milestone, there is a convergence of technologies, as I mentioned before, mostly AI-driven, but not only. Quantum computing, generative AI, blockchain, and all the other that you can, digital twins, that could be very influential. And I'm happy to further explore and discuss that with industry parties. The quintuple innovation helix plus AI configuration is a very interesting opportunity for enacting digital twins applications and thinking beyond the box. Okay, the spending is significant, as you see, 3.4 trillion at least on digital transformation, so the digitalization efforts. But again, the idea is to be human-centric. And I will close with some slides on human-machine interactions and synergies, in fact, whether it's neurological enhancement, evolving interactions, in essence, sort of a bionic, hopefully benign type of evolution that ties us with the machines more closely. Co-creation is a collaborative approach. It is truly the way to go forward. It is our only way, in a way, and this is what EPIC-WE is all about too. So this is, I guess, important and significant. Personalization, democratization of creative tools. This is very important, not only for the tools, but the empowering of the users of the tools, which is very relevant to what we're discussing here. Automation and efficiency for creative workflows. I mean, the idea of Industry 6.0 to me is, in a sense, reenacting possibly a modern version of the golden century of ancient Athens, 5th century, where, of course, they had slaves. Nowadays, hopefully, the machines will be our slaves, so we have free time to be philosophers like Rike, and of course, not the humans become the slaves of the machines. So they can become philosophers. Can you envision smart machines philosophizing, Rike? Okay, so I'm last slide here. Thank you for your patience. AI could be a catalyst for creativity, should be. Human intuition and ethical guidance are very important, and they need to be further developed. Again, the EPIC-WE is a very important context for this. Enhanced decision-making. I talked about the predictive, preventive, preemptive aspects of it, and accelerated innovation. So in fact, as all these things, and I talked about smart crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, you could have situations where AI and a smart market actually anticipates an inventor's creation and empowers an entrepreneur's initiatives and anticipates their needs even before they really have started pursuing them. So that's an interesting, in a sense, reality that may emerge, a possibility that may become a reality, where we put the cart before the horse, because the cart now is really smart. Anyway, closing with this, future trends in AI and human collaboration, AI as co-worker, democratization, ethical and intuitive AI interfaces. This is what I just referred to, the example about entrepreneurship and the like. And how AI could be anticipatory of entrepreneurial needs and initiatives. Co-creation is about amplifying human potential through AI collaboration. We should embrace it. In that sense, we should be very proactive and involved in shaping it. And that's very important. Okay, I will stop here. Thank you. And I hope it was useful.
Thank you very much, Elias. I have a ton of questions, and I believe also many of the participants have, but I write them down, friends, your questions, write them in the chat, or just make sure you don't forget them. But let's pass the Zoom to Rikke Toft Nørgaard to give us insights on how we do cultural innovation through Quadruple Helix in EPIC-WE. Let's just say it very briefly. There's a fantastic paper you can find that Rikke was a co-author of on this issue. You can find that link to the paper in the Games for Culture community.
Thank you so much, Rasmus, and thank you so much, Elias. I have a lot of messy notes as well. No one can see them right now, but that doesn't mind. So just before kind of sharing my presentation and diving into, let's say, how EPIC-WE as a project within cultural heritage and culture kind of grapples with and grab this quadruple helix, perhaps also quintuple helix approach that are the foundation of the core elements of the project. That is how we envision and do cultural innovation through culture making and game making, how we practice our sectorial transformative partnerships in the cultural hubs, and so on and so forth. So I'll try to capture the essence of the quadruple helix idea, and then show how we have kind of adapted it for cultural innovation and perhaps smart growth in culture and cultural heritage, and how we have materialized it in our practices of cultural hubs, and specifically towards what we call transformative cross-sector partnerships between creative industries, which would be the industry sector. Education institutions would be the university sector on Elias' slide, government, which would be the cultural heritage institutions in this project, and civil society, which will be the involvement of youth as co-creators and co-innovators. Also, how we are using this for co-creating cultural innovation, specifically in the form of cultural game jams and the creation of games through and for culture, and how this joint actions in the cultural hubs and the cultural game jams are enacted through these meetings in the middle that Elias also talked about. Then trying to kind of put it all together for these epic Tales of Tomorrow, I think I called them for this presentation, and how we practice quadruple helix cultural hubs for meetings in the middle within the project. Also, just again a short hook onto Elias's presentation. So within the cultural game jams and visible in the created games run for culture, we see some of these societal challenges that youth grapple with, or that are kind of provided into the game jam. So we had, for example, Óbidos in Portugal had a game jam with the lagoon, so you would call like climate cultural heritage. I know the Aarhus Cultural Hub are contemplating having a game jam that involves AI as creative partner, but also perhaps as theme. And I know that the third of the 3 cultural hubs in the project, the Hilversum Hub, have worked very much with social justice and equality, which is also kind of expressed through the game making. So that kind of dimension is also there, and the target on serving the public good, which is the publication Rasmus mentioned on the project. So just kind of really quickly trying to kind of make a little bridge between Elias's presentation and mine, and then I'll try to dive into how we concretely kind of practice this large system thinking in a very concrete manner, and this complex thinking and complex model, again, in a very kind of targeted manner, targeted towards cultural innovation and cultural heritage making. Okay, let's see if I can share the slides. So, let's see, and now you should see the speaker notes, and now you should see the right one. Right, Rasmus, I'm just looking at you here, so it should look right. Yes. Okay, and I'll try to keep it within kind of a 20-minute time frame, so we have a lot of time for also, I don't know, me and Elias discussing with each other, but also please, everyone out there, jot down your questions, comments, either to Elias or me, and we should have some time for like a deep dive, or somewhat of a deep dive of discussion afterwards. And now I'm making everyone a little bit small, so also shout if anything goes horribly wrong. Okay, so my name is Rikke Toft Nørgaard, and I'm the coordinator and scientific lead of the EPIC Horizon Europe project. And as I mentioned in this talk here, I'll try to show some of the research and innovation work that has been going on the macro level of the project, targeted towards the development of this EPIC quadruple helix cultural innovations ecosystem that are materialized in the cultural hubs and practices cultural game jams that has as a result the creation of games through and for culture. Yes. So in this talk today, I will share some tentative insights and results from the project, which full title is Empowered Participation Through Ideating Cultural Worlds and Environments, or EPIC for short. And basically it's a call upon sectors in culture, creative industries, research and education to join forces and meet in the middle to form what we call an EPIC in equal quadruple helix partnerships. So the focal point of the project is to research and contribute to cultural futures worth having, to empowerment of all of us, all of the EPIC in cultural heritage and in game making and culture making, and in this meeting point between culture, industry, education, and young citizens. And young citizens here, meaning young people between 15 and 25, either inside or outside the education system. And this is done to see what kind of ecosystem models and practices these partners can formulate together through these meetings in the middle, and for themselves back in the sectors through this kind of project on the macro level. And core principle of the project, or an overriding principle of the project, which I will not present, is walk the talk, practice what you preach. So the whole project, the whole of the Europe Horizon project, is practiced as a quadruple helix. It's practiced through these meetings in the middle, and it's tried to enact and live up to the principles it formulates for others, because we need to make them work for ourselves before we can kind of say what others could or should do if they want to do something similar. And especially for today's talk, you can see the consortium here. The project seeks to contribute to the world with what is called design-based research knowledge. It's a design-based research project. And these cultural innovations for cultural heritage, creative industries, higher education, and youth or society in the form of these ecosystem principles that can underpin and help bring about such more empowered, more participatory, more democratic, and more co-created futures within and across the sectors and partners. So you can see here, as I already mentioned, also the 3 hubs. So if you can see my arrow, we have the Aarhus hub here, which is one of the 3 hubs with Aarhus University, Aros Museum, and Filmby Aarhus. We have the Obidos hub here with Lusofana University, Battleship, and Obidos Municipality. And we have the Hilversum hub here with Sound and Vision, the University of Applied Sciences, and Dropstuff Media. And then we have these meso partners that helps us with broader kind of creative industries, networks, cultural heritage networks, and also policy, of course. So we bring together these 4 different partner types that I mentioned to join in these transformative partnerships and closely collaborate and co-create everything. So all partners are kind of research partners, all partners are innovation partners, all partners are culture partners, and so on and so forth. Of course, bringing into the mix their own kind of practices, values, visions, methods, and so on. But try to, meet in the open, in the middle, to see what kind of new methods and new forms and new values and new visions and new practices and new capabilities that might materialize. So that is kind of the core of the project on the macro level. Yes, very shortly, I talked about this before, but just to kind of focus our attention for today's talk, we have these 3 levels of the project. We have the Epic Greek Quadruple Helix Cultural Innovation Ecosystem and the Epic Greek Cultural Hubs in the Quadruple Helix system that I will talk about today. But we also have talks in the webinar series on all of the other levels, like the cultural game jams. Before Christmas, we will have on the youth dimension and the values and the diversity and so on and so forth in coming and also really carried out sessions. You can find them all. I'm sure Billit will be happy to share again the whole series where you can find all of this covered. Combined, the macro, meso, and micro level of the project delivers this, hopefully, a transferable framework for the partners, for the sectors, to work closely together to foster cross-sector cultural innovation in the form of culture making and game making by bridging the domains of games and culture, as well as to establish these new forms of transformative partnerships where we respect each other, are equal contributors, but also very, very curious about what we could do together that we could not do on our own. Sometimes we just bring our normal practices into the middle and practice them there, and that might have less value than doing it in our own hood, so to speak, where we are very, very expert and specialized. So if we are going to work across sectors in these very complicated and sometimes annoying ways, then we really need to be curious about what kind of new things, new practices that might emerge. And you could say the macro level principles that I will share with you today are the principles that might underpin these meetings, these cultural hubs, and these practices, so we get the most out of them, so they have the highest value. And the principles are, of course, formulated on Elias's and others' thinking on the quadruple helix, also on living labs that are very closely connected to cultural hubs, and of course also on game jams when we have the game jam dimension of it all. Okay. Super short slide. So for the last 10 years, I have been kind of occupied with conceptualizing and materializing what you could call alternative futures, specifically in higher education and for the university, but also within design, arts, and humanities. And so some of these, this speculative thinking and imagination, daydreaming perhaps even sometimes, is what we are trying to bring from conceptualizations or conceptualizing up in the sky, what you perhaps could call philosophy, which I also do, to materializing it down in the dirt in the Epic We project through our everyday practices within the partnerships, within the 3 cultural hubs, and then bringing those materializations to the world, so to speak. So today's talk is based on the article that Rasmus already mentioned that came out half a year ago, but even more so one of our protocols from the project, the protocol 1 on quadruple helix cultural innovation, and you can go there and find it on the website, and there you'll find all the principles and a lot of more other juicy stuff, also the general thinking, if some of this is interesting. We also have protocols on how to carry out cultural game jams for the creation of games for culture, and the research protocol and the practical protocols and so on. But for today, we'll focus on the protocol 1, the quadruple helix cultural innovation ecosystem and cultural hubs, and also in the end try to see, okay, what are some of the implications for the higher education sectors as an example in the end when we start to think in this way. Yes, so here we have the windmill or the meeting in the middle, the 4 arrows pointing to the middle of the creative industries, cultural heritage institution, youth citizens, and higher education institutions, each bringing their methods, their practices, their thinking, their core strength and capabilities into the middle, putting it on the table, and then trying to figure out what we can do here together. For this, the quadruple helix ecosystem is very tailored almost to the project, or you could say the project is tailored to the quadruple helix system, because we actually have these 4 sectors that kind of go back and forth between the middle. This is the Epic We logo in the middle, between the middle and their own sectors. So we bring stuff into the middle, and we take stuff from the middle and back into our sectors, and we might also even visit each other as we do in the project and look and learn how that looks at each other's kind of home field, and then also be inspired to translate, adopt, transform some of these things and bring them home to our own sectors again. Government here is the public institutions or the cultural heritage institutions. Society is youth. Business is the creative industry partners, and academic research is the universities or research institutions part of the project. And we really try to kind of tailor it to be quite equal. So we have equal partners from within all 4 sectors. All 4 partner types are also equal partners in the project. So they're all kind of full partners, except the youth, but we are making them full partners as the project runs along. There will also be talks in the webinar series on that kind of radical perspective we learned it is. But basically the Epic We model is based on research on quadruple helix innovation ecosystems, as well as practical applications of such models within creative industries. For example, the Reconfigure project that also have some nice reports coming out of that project. Research shows that stepping into these quadruple helix ecosystems carries the potential for sector partners to co-shape the future together. And this is exactly what we're looking for within culture, cultural heritage, cultural innovation, and creative industries, leading to better received and more sustainable solutions, especially for society, and especially when we involve as much as we can youth as an equal partner with an equal voice, and trying to create a clearing in the project where they can feel or enact even kind of a sense of empowered participation, have a say in the solutions. Then the solutions might fit better. The same for the cultural heritage institutions and so on. Yes. So to enter and enact such meetings in the middle, we of course within cultural heritage and cultural innovation needs new ecosystem, new knowledge cultures, new methods, new collaboration models. And these are what we are trying to develop in Epic We and give. One of the core outcomes of the Epic We project, try to deliver those models. So if people are interested in creating or engaging games through and for culture in the form that we did, or enact cultural game jams, host cultural game jams in the way that we did, well, then we have the models and the frameworks to support this and the principles that underpin it, so they don't have to go through a 3-year process of getting there, as we are doing currently. So what I'll try to do for the remaining part of the talk here, before kind of broadening out again, is to kind of zoom in on the protocol 1, and in the end the article, and say, okay, when examining current research, publication, projects, proven practices about quadruple helix, there are some recurring patterns that emerge for quadruple helix on the one hand, living labs on the other hand, that are kind of merged together and adapted for the core concept within EPIC-V on the quadruple helix cultural hub. We can derive some guiding principles for how to design and realize such ecosystems that are tailored explicitly to the domain of cultural innovation, and the creation supporting these meetings in the middle that forms this kind of EPIC-V that I talked about, and that can then be used to co-host, co-organize, co-create certain kind of activities such as cultural game jams, or co-create games through and for cultures. You can just see a short overview here of what you can find in the protocol, but I'll kind of try to make it even more practical here. So I tried to kind of condense, it's a long protocol, condense some of the principles to what we would call potentially EPIC-V tales of tomorrow. So looking across all the literature, looking across the whole protocol, there are kind of four recommendations, you could say. So one recommendation that we are trying to enact, both in the cultural hubs, but also in the game jams, in the cultural game jams, is to include citizens as equal partners. So in the development of, when we are doing cultural innovation, when we're doing culture making or game making across sectors or as cross-sector partnerships, citizens needs to play a central and critical role to make these solutions that we come up with both valuable, meaningful, and sustainable. So we need to position citizens as co-innovators or inventors, and they need to be invited to be inventors of their own desired cultural products and futures. Even though we have some brilliant ideas, we still need to involve them and see if those ideas are actually also brilliant to what we sometimes call the end users. Citizens are also needs to be included as central research and innovation partner if we are doing research or innovation. So their voice are also a voice of knowledge and the voice of imagination and innovation, especially if we want to create research and innovations that have a credibility, authenticity, cultural value, and sustained benefit for recent innovations that has impact, would be another word perhaps. So in the design, test, and evaluation of the cultural game jams, for example, in the project, we are always bringing back our ideas, our preliminary results, our preliminary designs to the end users, to the youth, and to the cultural heritage partners, of course, the creative industries, research partners, and see, okay, does this make sense? Now they experience it, youth has lived through a game jam, they tried to make these games through and for culture. Did it make sense if this is what we are trying to achieve? So that's one of the really central core recommendations. The next one is innovation through democratic and participatory processes. So no sector in the project provide a service, so to speak, to the other sectors or to society. Rather, the sectors meet in the middle to co-create value, to think together, and to develop the new practices together. So it's a EPIC-V togetherness project and not a providing service project, you could say. So what constitute valuable futures within each of the sectors have to be kind of cooperated, coordinated, and communicated, so it becomes a joint future, so to speak, or future that makes somewhat sense to all sectors, you could say. We all need to let go of something to gain something new. So there's an equal distribution of Helix partners, as I mentioned in the project. There also needs to be it in these cultural innovation hubs to carry out what we formulate as cultural game jams and games for culture. Each partner needs to be acknowledged and involved as co-researchers, co-designer, co-innovator, and co-practitioner when we do cultural innovation. And we need to bring with us and be met with respect, bring with us our own domain and expertise, but be open for it to be corrupted by the other sectors and what they bring with them so we can have something new. The third recommendation is for this cross-sectorial collaboration within a co-creating partnership that I already mentioned quite a lot. So on the macro level, we have this large system model, or the quadruple helix model, and we have the whole sectors, the quadruple helix partners, try to take joint decisions, and then a little bit further down on the ground in the dirt, we have these cultural hubs where we have really concrete partners doing this on a very concrete day-to-day level. And then on the micro level, they are carrying it all the way into their own institutions through the carrying out of these cultural game jams and the creation of these games through and for culture. Last recommendation from the quadruple helix perspective is what is called sometimes mode-free knowledge or mode-free organizations or cultures, and how during cultural innovation need to, you could say, cultivate mode-free cultural knowledges and innovation or mature. So mode-free knowledges or mode-free institutions is these new, looking for new methods and new practices also implicated on Elias's slides on integrating media-based society, for example. So we have all these internal tensions and differences. What is value even? What is knowledge? What is a good result? What has meaning and what does not? When is something too academic, for example? When is something not academic enough? What is rigor? All these discussions, what is a game? All these discussions, we have to kind of create a new vocabulary in the middle. We have to create new methods. We have to allow new ways of showing research and innovation. So it's not only research articles, it's also in the form of games. Game products are also research products, for example. And articles are perhaps also useful for the creative industry sector or for youth, or youth can co-write research even though they don't have a PhD. And all these sorts of things to try to cultivate new ways of thinking and doing. So we can kind of put all of this together in these 4 bullet points here. So to think about the future of cultural innovation within the cultural heritage sector, creative industries, education or research, and also larger society and youth. We need to innovate all the sectors, also the university, in using more democratic and participatory processes. We need to include citizens, youth, also as Central University partner and for the other sectors as well. We need to enact these cross-sectorial collaborations in a way that are way more demanding and open and joint, not just providing services to each other, but actually having these co-creative partnerships, almost like having a family or living together in a quite concrete way sometimes even, and then integrate and be open for these very alternative, otherwise alien kind of mode-free knowledges, that things can look quite different when we do cultural innovation out of listening and curiosity rather than already knowing what we are looking for. I'll skip these slides. They will be on the website. That is the Living Lab perspective, and I know there's already been a talk on that, so we'll just skip to the last slides here. The article mentioned by Rasmus in the beginning, where you can also read more on how this then supports the public good and public goods. So public goods would be the games created through and for culture during these cultural game jams, and public good would be the value of doing this in the open, in the middle, together across sectors without always thinking about what's in it for me, or how can we capitalize on this, but rather something will be valuable by doing this, even though we don't know exactly why. And sometimes it will be a little bit out in the future, because it's also learning to learn in new ways, to riff off another of Elias's slides here. So if you are a university, I'm at a university, or if you are a higher education institution, you need to think about quite concretely how you can approximate, how you can transform universities or higher education institutions. This also goes for creative industries or cultural heritage institutions. You can kind of co-translate into your own sectors, so to speak, or to society. But what is the implication here if we are to become such a mode free institution and enter into a quadruple helix and meet in the middle and become a quadruple helix actor? So again, this principle, riffing off the whole of Protocol 1 and our research so far, this principle kind of encapsulates these kind of very intricate and interwoven partnerships of the 4 partners acting together as a quadruple helix ecosystem towards public good and public goods. So again, here we need to move higher education institutions, perhaps also the other sectors, towards more demanding, more concrete, more enacted, but democratic, action-oriented co-creation for public good. So again, we need to actually not only deliver knowledge to the middle, we need to go there and be there and live there. And that can be quite uncomfortable sometimes for classical academic institutions that actually become part of the co-creating things rather than delivering knowledge on demand, so to speak, delivering a service. And sometimes also for the others, because classic research partners can sometimes be quite stiff, or it can be a little bit hard to understand how this is useful if you're very, very knee deep into some sort of practice, everyday business, trying to make it work and so on. But that's part of it. So the next one is practicing these transformative partnership as an EPIC we. So this again really accentuates the values that are needed in the cultural hub, and we need to kind of check up on each other if they are there. Also with the youth, do they feel these values as well? So the principle accentuates the open, welcoming, democratic, solidary, and epistemic approach partners, sectors needs to take towards each other. So really be welcoming towards each other, be open, be solidaric, be curious, be ready for something that might feel very alien and so forth. And here that can be hard, especially when it comes to the research dimension for higher education institutions, to accept, listen for, acknowledge that something other sectors do might also count as knowledge, perhaps even research, and vice versa. When it, for example, comes to innovation, then the roles can be reversed sometimes. Second to last slide. So this also means that higher education institutions, probably also the other sectors, needs to strive for what we call empowered participation, and that's also the first 2 words of what EPIC stands for: empowered participation in, and so on. So what is empowered participation? When do we feel empowered? How do we adapt, transform, let go if someone feels disempowered in a situation? How do we then become more open, and so on? And that's really what we are aiming for all the time, this kind of empowered participation in research making, culture making, game making, innovation making. How can we do this together? And that again goes well beyond partners simply meeting to exchange knowledge, products, skilled workers, other goods, and highlight the importance of co-creating in the middle. So we need to do co-communication, cooperation, like andelsbevægelsen. So all co-operations, not just cooperate, but co-operations, co-creations, collaborations, all these co-things needs to be done all the time, rather than, oh, you do this, you do this, you do this, and then see you at the end of the project, or see you at the end of the year, or the game jam, or whatever. So as a result, we have this, so the empowered participation is not only for the youth co-creating the games, it's also for the sectors. I, as a university or representing a university, needs to feel that I'm actually empowered through this Quadruple Helix Cultural Hub. I can do things. I have access to fields. I have co-access to tools, methods, practices, spaces, places, and so on and so forth that I would never have on my own. And I can then do things as research or as knowledge or as education that I would never be able to do otherwise. So that also again indicates that partners must meet each other halfway in the cultural hubs, get over ourselves and meet in the middle. And we need to focus on realizing the innovations and the outputs and the projects for public good. So what we are doing should be public goods, and the public goods should be targeted towards public good. And of course, this is the final slide. And of course, this is quite annoying. The annoyance are very different for all of the sectors, but the annoyance in a good way is real. We are disturbed and we are disturbing each other all the time, hopefully also in a good way, to see if being disturbed for 3 years might lead somewhere good, might bring about some new goods that might be useful for all of us and for the middle. So again, how could we enact Epic Bee Futures? How could all of us on the macro level through these Quadruple Helix partnerships or transformative partnership, on the meso level, perhaps through these collaborative cultural hubs or something similar, and on the micro level through concrete activities such as the cultural game jams or co-created futures where we move in and out of each other, so to speak. That's really kind of what we are thinking about in the project. Trying to enact the principles, live up to the principle. Of course, we will fail, but hopefully fail forward and learn a lot from that, and then adapt these principles. The next adaptation is coming to the spring, which will be super exciting, trying to integrate everything we learned up until now. And then in the end, of course, this will be one of the core deliverables of the project.
Excellent. Thank you, Rikke.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have about 15 minutes left for a talk between Elias and Rikke. We also have time for Q&A, hopefully within those 15 minutes. You have both been really good at posting while each other were speaking different links. Thank you, Elias, for the links to several of you. It was really nice to follow. As Rikke was talking, you were referencing it. But why don't you two start out, and then I doubt it, but if you run out of stuff to talk about, I have lots of questions around, for example, in the dirt. I like that one. How do we get these people around the table? Or how do we make sure that those that are supposed to concretely in the dirt be part of it actually are in part of it? But that's just go for it, you two.
Yeah, and also if there's any questions out there in the void behind the screens, post them in the chat or just raise a digital hand, or so we can have like a discussion all over the place.
Yeah, if you're shy, I'll read up the question, so you don't necessarily have to show yourself, etc. But of course, this is a very safe environment here. No one will be bullied. So anyway, Rikke and Elias, go for it.
Thank you, and thank you, Rikke. In fact, we've had some discussions on several occasions with Rikke, and some of the points, including the macro, meso, micro levels, represent our thinking on that, and I'm glad to see that being embedded in the process here. I have a sort of again, half facetious observation, Rikke. If you go one of your slides where you represent, I just wanted to ensure we have, not that I mind, as you know, but just to have the right type of symbolism intrinsic in our content creation. If you go, I don't know if can you share your slides to go back so I can tell you where to go. Can you?
Yes, I can do that super quick.
We don't just real quick, so we don't. But I don't. And go back. I don't know, 4 or 5 slides. There. Slide 7. So I was actually intrigued because we want to make sure this could be sort of an engineering symbol referring to some type of internal combustion system from my engineering days. But we have to be careful because the geometry, topology, and orientation of this. And I was just researching on the internet about the different versions of that symbol, right facing, left facing, and all that. So unless I'm in a different type of company, which I don't think I am, I mean, you may get strong supporters and followers from the second party right now in the German elections. But anyway, I think we needed to discuss that. I couldn't resist mentioning it, but I also wanted to make sure I don't forget.
Yeah,
we have
we
to somehow
actually
tweak that.
yeah, we actually heard that in our EU periodic reporting meeting that someone else saw it. It's not
Oh,
even
you
our
did
model.
already? Okay, so I'm
Yes.
not the crazy one. Okay.
No, you're not the crazy one. Or there are several crazy ones. I don't know.
Let's not. I don't want to spend time on this more than that. I think the point here, the design. In fact, the reason the symbol emerged from religion, both Indian and ancient European civilizations, is to show the cycle of life and the dynamic of change. And I think, although there could be a very evil aspect to it, I think there is some relevance to what the power of symbolism in it. And I have no problem adopting and promoting and making clear, of course, this is what we represent here. Anyway, let's talk.
Coming from Denmark, I would say it's a windmill, but that's just me and green energy.
Yes, that could be also, yes. But I mean, that's, yes, gone with the wind. Okay, so just to mention the Mode 3, to make a more explicit link, it has come. Novotny and Gibson were people that have written about knowledge production systems to begin with, and Mode 1 and 2, they align and relate and reflect more linear innovation models and systems. And as we go towards more highly nonlinear and with embedded higher order learning that I discussed, that's where, along with the quadruple helix, we added the Mode 3 concept in our 2009 paper with my colleague David Campbell. And this is what you're referring to. Mode 3 is really highlighting, emphasizing the need for universities that are flexible. In fact, I'll put a link on this. I'm reminded of some work that is accessible online about what I call fractal research, education, and innovation ecosystems, which is a vision about sort of next generation universities that are really centric. They're built around centers of scholarship and excellence, as it was the case with the perhaps ancient universities and medieval and so forth. There were groups of people freely traveling and communicating as best they could at the time, dealing with themes of interest and issues of scholarship they focused on. So that is something transcending, in effect, the current schools and departments and so forth, transdisciplinary and in a sense fractal in its nature, in the sense that it's a hub-and-spoke self-referential architecture. So that, to me, I'll put that link next, but that to me is an interesting theme to focus on. The other thing I wanted to ask is about, and also highlight, is what you referred to about games. In effect, games help shape our language of thought. They help in define, develop, craft, and enact our dialects, our ways of thinking and expressing our concepts, and in a sense also standardizing, developing common concepts of reference and frames of reference for conceptualizing and contextualizing concepts and ideas that may be complex, that may be nuanced. So we do it in a way that actually helps us have more understanding than confusion, have fewer errors of omission or commission, and type 1 and 2 errors, so to speak, from statistics, and more understanding and clarity. And that is very important, I guess. Developing dialects, means of communication that are both effective and efficient is crucial. And the games are tools, methodologies for enacting that. Last point is about what we discussed also, the idea of moving at a higher level in terms of looking at families or groups of tools and developing toolkits that are appropriately aligned and designed and aligned with needs and priorities regarding also the TP3 I mentioned before, theory, policy, practice, and politics. So in the end, we need tools and toolkits that actually could help us engage, as Rasmus said, toolkits that can get us dirty, basically, to get people engaged. And that, obviously, in my mind, the philosophy, the design philosophy, and the design thinking behind the helical architecture approach is really the idea of top-down, combined, and shaped and reinforced and driven in the end by bottom-up. This is the essence of democracy. The leaders and the elites, the people with the responsibility and empowerment, with the mandates to actually be responsive and adaptive to the requests, priorities, expectations, and demands of the citizenry, the members of societies, and the agents of the economies, in effect, the stakeholders. So that, to me, these are important points. One last question I have. I'd be happy if the one other concept that came up in our discussion was this concept of expert devil advocate, and Kim Hoflod is played that role. He can be here today, but we have his questions. Do you have them handy, or I can share my screen, bring them up?
Yeah, I have them. Thank you. Yes, I'm also mindful of time. So before devil's advocating us, and if you have the time, I know Rasmus will be the hard timekeeper here. I'll just answer the 3 questions you posed, Elias, if that's okay with you, Rasmus, and try to do it somewhat.
I find it so interesting that I hope people will be okay with the fact that we will go a bit over time here. Maybe.
Yes, yeah. But let's take it in rounds at least.
Yeah.
So and I'll take it from the bottom up, Elias, as you just said. So the toolkits, first of all, and toolkits that can get us dirty, as you said. I think that's really at the heart of what we are trying to achieve in the project. So we have EPIC project website, which is a kind of normal Europe Horizon project website, you could say, even though it's brilliant, of course, or EPIC. But then we also have the EPIC resource website. So one of the things is to publish everything in the open, also as it's underway or in process, so everyone can have a voice and react to it. That's one thing. But also to actually deliver quite concrete toolkits on the micro, meso, and macro level. So, and these should be interconnected to get us into the dirt or get us into the thick of it, or whatever we should call it. So of course we will have in the end the quadruple helix cultural innovation ecosystem model. We will have the quadruple helix cultural hub also as quite concrete models with the principles, the underpinnings of how to enact those on the ground, locally and globally, within a sector, across sectors. But we will also have a toolkit for how to carry out the cultural game jams as a cultural hub practice, you could say, that encapsulates this kind of approach to cultural innovation. And so these toolkits will be toolkit that can get us dirty, because they're for very kind of concrete everyday practices of this kind of high level thinking. And they should be there, and they should have a form and be quite visual, the most 3 knowledges we talked about, visual and adaptable and flexible, so it can kind of be intelligible for all the sectors and for all the partners, so they can adopt them, also partners that are not us and coming from the outside. But they are also quite dirty toolkits, because they have been, they're not something that have been conceptualized in our heads, so to speak, but tested through kind of 12 different cultural game jams enacted in 3 cultural hubs across Europe within a 3-year time frame, and led to kind of 84 different games to inform culture, and 360 youth have experienced them and reacted to them and so forth. So it's not just, you could say, like a thought up proposal, but it's something that is quite dirty already, so to speak. And I think that's very important, and that's also why it is a design-based research project, so we can actually do that kind of thing, like iteratively evolve it. And we don't know what the end will be yet, because it has to make sense. We don't know the sense or meaning or value yet. We have a sense of it now, I would say, but we are nearing something that makes more and more sense and is less and less meaningless, to say it very humbly. The second part with games as systems, yes, I think the game making part and the culture making part are kind of really balanced in the project. Also, so game making is seen as an innovative form of culture making. So games are interactive, they are systems, they are rule systems, but they're also worlds to experience that are interactive. There are two dimensions. They are the one that makes the games, the youth. It's not us making the games and then making youth play them. It's youth making games to us, so to speak. They want to tell us something. They want to tell something about cultural heritage. They want to showcase the meaningfulness or the meaninglessness of European values, what it is to be reacting to, enacting, imagining future cultural heritage. So we have all these layers when we look at the first 50 games. I think we have 50 game concepts now, and we can see this, they are quite different. So we have games as a new form of empowered participation in culture. So going into a very classical institutions such as Aros Art Museum in Aarhus, looking at the paintings on the wall and then creating a game as a reaction to that experience or to that art that is exhibited there. You also have games that are enacting value systems and saying, what do I think about culture as a young person? What is issues that I see either in the artwork or in the world, and how can I react artfully with a game upon those issues? So games as a cultural heritage artifact in its own right. So games as culture, I would say. So you have games through culture where you use cultural heritage and then create a system around it that brings it to life and give it its own voice. You have games for culture where you use games as a medium to say something about the world, to react to something in the world, to showcase another possible world. And then we have games as culture where you actually create a game that count as art on the long term, or as a cultural heritage artifact, or something that is cultural heritage like in its own way. And it's very interesting to see how youth, how the citizens, how society, culture makes sense of it all. And that's where we learn something through these systems. Last part, and then I'll shut up. So we have the mode 2, mode 3, mode 1, I would say, also within higher education and higher education philosophy. There you have mode 1 as the ivory tower, where we own knowledge and then give it to the world. And then we have the mode 2 institutions that are where we are, I would say, becomes a little bit political, unfortunately. Now, the entrepreneurial university, or the knowledge factory, or the skilled workforce factory that the university has become. And then when we think about higher education philosophy, we have the mode 3, which is more like a forsamlingshus or andelsbevægelse, a community hall, this meeting place in the middle where we intermingle, and the university does not provide a service or lead for society, but is a close partner living there along with the others. So again, I think for me at least, that's the mode 3 promise, that this meeting in the middle and trying to create the future together rather than providing services to each other, I find quite compelling.
Thank you, Rikke. And I feel that we should do a session 2. That we should actually have a follow-up session somehow with the two of you, because Elias has been very kind and generous in his comments in the chat. Maybe Elias, you want to just wrap it up, and then I'll give it back to you, Rikke. And then I think, as a respect of the time frame that we said to the participants, we should probably wrap it up in about 5 minutes. So
yes, I think thank you all for your time and presence. I hope again has been of some value. I added some comments at the bottom there, Rikke, about possible games I would like to discuss, and I would really like to the slides that I showed. I would like to see how they could serve as some of them, parts of them, as guidelines for games design, and that could be part of the toolkit development, in effect. The point, one point I would like to make really, we are literally, and this is an issue of urgency that I would like to convey. That doesn't mean that we should panic or that would be productive. That would be counterproductive. But the fact is that we are forced, as we speak, to engage in fixing the engines of plain Earth as it's flying. We need to do this corrective action in flight, and we also have some drunken, let's say, passengers on board that need somehow to figure out how to develop a dialogue, maybe a game between inebriated and less inebriated, inebriated in the broad sense, obviously, somehow with alternative or divergent perspectives, stakeholders. These are the challenges. These are, in effect, what we talk about, what I'm referred to is higher order games with multi-stage components and some, well, that can become very hairy math and demanding. There may be people that we could tap into that have that type of expertise. But in the end, these are the very critical trade-offs. We are forced, I think, to really contemplate some very difficult choices that will become increasingly costly and difficult the more we delay effective action, corrective action. And that's the simple, plain and scary also truth of it. I mentioned nuclear fusion because this is something I'm exploring very proactively with stakeholders. There are clearly special interests always involved. You need those to really drive the investment and the profiteering aspect of any technological development. I mean, that's why one of my ancestors said that the war is the father of everything, right? So, but we still have peace and pursuits that are peaceful in this context, leveraging technology. And we need to really look into developing a modern, democratic, transparent version. And that's my closing message. We need to develop, in my view, a modern, transparent, and democratic in democracy, enabling an environment protecting version of self-sufficiency and self-reliance in Europe. I realize there is historical baggage and all that stuff, but again, we should not be afraid to revisit and understand and assess and adapt concepts that may be critical for our future, regardless of political correctness or not. That is irrelevant. That is dangerous, in fact, right now, given what is happening anyway. I mean, I think it was Tony Blair I heard him being quoted on BBC that, populists are those that simply effectively address the problems, address the grievances without necessarily resolving them, but they leverage them. So we need to make sure we do the right things for the right reasons. Okay? Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Elias. I'll say something.
Happy to talk again in the future, Rasmus. Sorry.
Excellent. Let's do a session 2. Wrap it up.
I'll just say something like super doesn't mean do not intend it to be provocative. It might be, but something kind of just opening up the field of imagination. So yes, of course, we need to fix the planet. So problem solving and solutions and useful solutions are very important, and we need to fix the known unknowns. But I also think, coming from arts and culture and the humanities, that we also need to make sure we also do just as many useless things as useful things, like daydreaming and imagining and being hope punk. and have places for daydreaming, having projects and money for daydreaming, do idea making just as much as we do problem solving, and creating just as many imaginations as we do solutions. So we also have a field for the unknown unknowns, the things we do not know, and we don't know how to come to know them. That's for me where the heart of humanities and humanistic innovation lies, daydreaming the impossible dream. And I think that's what game making in Games Through and For culture and what we are trying to do in the Epic Week project is also about, providing a space there that might bring up very surprising, perhaps even useful things. Some of them might even be solutions, but they don't need to be. They can just happen. And I think that's quite a nice project compared to many other projects I've been in.
Thank you, Rikke. And before I lose everyone's attention, I just want to say in 6 days, 22 hours, 23 minutes, and 2 seconds, 1 second, there will be another Epic We workshop. This one will be around gaming and cultural innovation, perspectives from cultural heritage institutions and creative industries. So next Monday at 2 o'clock in 6 days and 22 hours and 22 minutes now. So thank you very much, Yannis, and thank you, Rikke, and thank you everyone for being part of this capacity building workshop today. And I hope to see you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone.
Bye. Bye.